In royal politics, the loudest themes are protocol and tradition, but the real pivots arrive as quiet domestic choices that read like text. That's the case now, after years of tension and point scoring, when any overt reconciliation would look stagey or doomed, King Charles switched to the language of interiors. In the state drawing room at Hillsborough Castle, his official residence in Northern Ireland, prominently placed photographs of Prince Harry and Meghan have appeared. This is not a press release, not a choreographed doorstep hug, not a corridor leak. It is subtler. And therefore louder. In a system where every mirror and frame is signed off, such images don't land on a mantle by accident. They're an intentional layout of a family narrative about membership, status, and boundaries. Contrast is part of the composition. Photos of the Sussexes, yes. Photos of Prince Andrew, no. Absence can be as declarative as presence. When a house tells the story, it sets the type so even a casual visitor reads the subtext. You can love family at a distance, roles can change, reputations can be repaired, but not by amnesia. For a king who inherited not only a crown but a fragile trust, this is the right template: show magnanimity where it's strategic, steal where it's necessary. The gesture didn't arise in a vacuum. It sits on a runway of small, disciplined moves that began when diagnosis jolted everyone's priorities. Harry's immediate flight to London reactivated private courtesies that the institution understands better than any: a brief audience, no post-meeting freelancing, gifts exchanged as ritual not performance. Those are the first stitches. Hillsborough is the seam. It moves the narrative from awkward detent to quiet normalization. The king acknowledges a fractured closeness in the most royal way possible by letting the house speak. The venue matters. Hillsborough is a memory palace for political rapprochement, a site where competing stories learn to sit on the same sofa without combusting. When symbols are chosen in a room that has hosted treaties and reconciliations, they inherit that muscle memory. You do not need a caption, the architecture provides one. This is soft power at its most technical. Courtiers will tell you that photographs work like valves. Inclusion releases pressure, removal applies it. Frames can advance a storyline by inches without inviting a storm. The result is policy without proclamation. The Sussexes are family, they are not returning to the rota, they are present in the sovereign's domestic canon and absent from the sovereign's working file. Andrew's omission, by contrast, performs the new red line: consequences are not reversible by endurance. One composition, two doctrines: mercy for estrangement, stringency for scandal, living side by side without contradiction. That doctrinal clarity is the real modernization. It says more than any new model monarchy speech could manage. Operationally, the Hillsborough edit simplifies the next 6 months. A visible olive branch lowers the emotional temperature around any shared appearances. It also puts oxygen back into the idea of calibrated proximity. The king can host or be hosted without the press pack reading every overlap as a return. Think state occasions, not day-to-day duties; cathedrals, not corridors. Behind the scenes, the communications win is stronger still. When the walls are doing the talking, the press office can do less. Selective silence becomes strategy, not absence. You correct clear fabrications, and let the rooms handle the rest. That's how you starve the tone of the meeting genre of oxygen. You provide one verifiable fact, what's on the mantle, and refuse to graduate it into theatre. The family geometry remains 3-track. Axis 1, king a younger son, etiquette, privacy, periodic contact governed by health and diary. Axis 2, heir a younger brother, rigid, slow, likely to remain glacial until both the heat and the audience's appetite are lower. Axis 3, institution heir public, consistency above catharsis. Hillsborough's frames serve all 3 axes at once. For Charles, they're an exercise in sovereign latitude. The monarch decides the domestic narrative and sets the baseline for courtesy. For William, they absorb demand for drama and reduce the pressure on the Wales family to become the royal entertainment business. For Harry and Meghan, they restore a dignified background presence within the world they left, without obliging them to re-enter its machinery. None of this promises a fairy-tale third act. It doesn't need to. The smart goal is negative space, fewer crises, fewer sources, fewer forced reunions that collapse under their own symbolism. In that sense, The frames are a security system. They reduce the attack surface. If the Sussexes appear at a major moment, the public has been prepped. Images at Hillsborough have normalized their presence in the monarch's domestic story. If they don't, the frames still hold. The olive branch does not wither just because a diary didn't align. That is the difference between gesture and strategy. Gesture asks to be applauded, strategy asks to be sustained. Why does this matter now? Because trust in the crown depends less on fireworks and more on morale, the belief that the institution is sane, proportionate, and capable of learning. The last few years delivered too much spectacle and not enough steadiness. Charles's interior diplomacy reads as a correction. It marks a return to the monarchy's best habits: under-promise, over-deliver, absorb friction, radiate calm. That posture is not only palatable to older monarchists who value continuity, it also maps to younger voters' ethics, accountability with humanity, boundaries without cruelty. The Hillsborough selection telegraphs both. It is merciful where mercy is safe, it is merciless where the line must hold. History provides the precedent sheet. Queen Elizabeth II used interiors with surgical intelligence, who sat where at a state banquet, which balcony appearances were singular, which photographs crowded a piano. Her genius was to make the house a character. Charles inherits that dramaturgy but adapts its tone. He is more explicit about moral sorting, less interested in endlessness for its own sake. The rigid continuity of everyone is always present if they are related has quietly been retired. In its place is a rule set: kinship earns courtesy, conduct earns consequence, work earns visibility. The Hillsborough mantle is the index card. Of course, nothing in a dynasty is static. There are contingencies that could stress-test this approach. A new controversy elsewhere in the family might force the palace to tighten again. A leak war could tempt the comms team to narrate instead of curate. A mistimed exclusive could re-poison the well. That is why the cadence matters. Proceed by quarter turns, not revolutions. Never make the quiet seem like a stunt. Let the public get bored of the story. Boredom, in this context, is peace. The households should set 3 rules and hold them for a year. 1. No running commentary on private meetings, from either side. 2. No mixed signals about working status. Attendance is ceremonial or familial, never functional. 3. No plastic reconciliation scenes. The only images are the ones that occur naturally because the calendar produced them. Everything else is for the mantle. Brand arithmetic follows. The monarchy lives on 2 kinds of credit: reverence and relevance. Reverence comes from continuity, relevance from moral coherence and measurable usefulness. The olive branch curation trades neither away. It keeps the visual grammar of monarchy, stately rooms, curated frames, ritual, while refreshing the values, clear consequences for the unreformable, clear grace for the reformable. That's how you speak to a multi-generational audience without fracturing the signal. Zoom in on the principles. For the king, the move is classic constitutional judo: regain initiative with gestures that can't be vetoed by headlines. You cannot spin what the sovereign chooses to display inside his own house. The picture is the proof. For the Prince of Wales, the move creates headroom to advance his own agenda, make the institution feel less grand and more useful, without the drag of daily Sussex narratives. For the Sussexes, it creates a dignified corridor back to occasional presence without surrendering independence. They can show up at points of national significance, avoid routine palace dependency, and keep their California architecture intact. For the public, it's an answer to a question most people didn't know they were asking: can this family be normal enough to be credible again? A mantle with the right faces. And the right emissions says yes, in the only way that matters: through choices, not through speeches. Will this be enough? Enough is the wrong unit. The monarchy's health is not scored by a single reconciliation or rupture, it's scored by the average temperature over time. If the next year delivers calmer weeks, fewer eruptions, cleaner lines, then Hillsborough will look, in retrospect, like the hinge. In 6 months you want the story to feel smaller. In 12, you want it to feel boring. Boring, for a constitutional monarchy, is an objective, not a slur. There is one more advantage to this interior diplomacy: it preserves dignity. When families reconcile loudly, they rarely reconcile well. they perform instead of repair. The sovereign's job is to prevent performance from being the only language available. Photographs are better than proclamations because they can be ignored, they grant privacy by being public. A visitor can glance, note, move on. The people who need to understand will understand, everyone else can enjoy the flowers. That is the deepest craft of monarchy, embedding meaning in ordinary elegance so the nation's nerves aren't constantly jangled by melodrama. From here, the best case is incremental consolidation. A state service where seating plans speak softly. A trooping of the color where balcony arithmetic is tidy and unsurprising. A Christmas broadcast that mentions family in a tone that is neither frosty nor syrupy. A coronation anniversary marked by service rather than memoir. None of these moments needs a headline if the house is already speaking. The images at Hillsborough are not the first word or the last word, they are the decision to use fewer words. Should this approach harden into habit, it will outlive the present quarrels and become part of the Crown's updated operating system. The OS would look like this: reduce spectacle, increase service, separate kinship from office, treat interiors as policy, let rooms do emotional labor so people don't have to. That is how you make a medieval institution feel 2025 literate without pretending it's a startup. It is also how you make reconciliation survivable. Not everything has to be solved, not everyone has to be friends. But everyone has to fit within a frame that makes sense. Hillsborough has shown the frame. And that returns us to where we began, quiet choices that read like text. A mantle is not a manifesto, but it can be a map. The king has placed 2 photos where the state receives guests and history catches its breath. He has removed one that would sabotage the same room with cognitive dissonance. The resulting tableau is both kind and clear. It is a family's admission that it has learned something and an institution's assurance that it still knows how to carry itself. In a season when too many stories tried to force a climax, the wisest line is the simplest one interiors can deliver: life goes on, standards hold, doors stay on their hinges, and the noise outside doesn't get to rearrange the furniture inside. If the Crown keeps to that sentence, this small, domestic olive branch will prove to be one of the shrewdest statecrafts of the year.